Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. My dad was the single greatest man I ever met. He used to tell me, Glenn, I'm not going to tell you how to be a man. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to let you watch me, and you're welcome. That always struck me very deeply. My dad never intended to try and make my path easy or smooth or devoid of any hurdles. He understood that very strain and struggle was part of the journey that's going to make every one of us into the person that we're intended to be. I would encourage everybody to think when they're leading people that our job is to prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Coach Candice Walls. Coach Walls is the Assistant Director of Athletics for Athletic Performance at University of Louisiana. Greetings, Candice. Thanks for joining us.
No, I appreciate you for having me.
Now, you've been in the profession for almost 15 years, done a number of internships. You were actually the strength and conditioning coach at Berea, right? When you were a student athlete. That's an interesting background, right?
Yes. It got me started. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything at the time. I had no clue what I was doing, but yeah, we could call myself that, I guess.
Right, that's interesting. Spent some time at Citadel. Spent a long time at Baylor. Now you're there at University of Louisiana. I have you on because obviously this coronavirus chapter of all of our lives is a very interesting chapter. And I wondered what strength and conditioning athletic performance coaches are saying, are thinking, are discussing in terms of their athletes. I know you guys there at University of Louisiana are doing some unique things, but I have a couple questions regarding this whole thing. And I think the first question I'll ask is, what were some of the conversations you had amongst your staff over the last week with regard to the roles that you play, right? You guys spend a whole lot of time with athletes normally.
Yeah, so that's such a big, broad thing because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're way more than just coaches, right? Like a lot of, especially our staff, like someone's a husband, somebody's got kids, like you've got girlfriends, boyfriends. So it's crazy because you're still a person, right? So this virus is going on. You have no idea how to react because just like the rest of the world, this is so new. So you have all that stress of kind of the outside world, and then you've got to kind of walk in, put your whistle on, and you're a coach again. And, you know, for the longest, we didn't even know, I guess, how to address it because we didn't even really know what it was. Like, I'm not going to lie. We were like, oh, this will pass. And then it got more serious. And, you know, in our staff meetings, we're like, wow, guys, like, we may have limited time because we started looking over in other countries and kind of seeing how they're shutting everything down. And we're just like, is this going to happen? Like, oh, my gosh, like, you know, sports is a multi-million-dollar business. Like, what is this going to do? And then we have all these student athletes. Like, what is this going to mean for their season? So I think our conversation started out with, oh, wow, did you see what happened, you know, overseas? And then it turned into, oh, my gosh, it's here. And then it turned into, what do we do for our student athletes? And I think in that moment, our staff's a little unique. We always kind of think outside the box. I'm very fortunate to kind of be surrounded by some really creative individuals and people that, I guess, care more about the person our student athlete is instead of the student athlete. So the first question we really ask ourselves is, what's the population we're dealing with? These are kids. Are they going to stay here? Are they going to go home? Okay, when they get home, what resources do they have? I mean, we're in South Louisiana. Louisiana is a very impoverished, you know, stricken state. A lot of our kids come from Louisiana. And we're like, okay, if they do go home, are they going to be able to eat? Will they get 3 meals in? Our next question was like, okay, are they going to have a support system? Like, I know I'm freaking out, and I'm in my 30s. I couldn't imagine what a 19-year-old is going through in their head, especially if they go down the wormhole of news and social media. So it's like, okay, when they get home, will they have a support system? And then our next thing was, what resources will these athletes have? And will they be okay with letting their guard down and telling us, like, Candice, man, I'm only going to have access to 1 meal. Or, hey, I don't have the money to go buy some bands. And then the other thing was like, okay, NCAA, what's our restrictions? So I think we started with who they are as a person, and then we kind of just dove into that. And not one time for the first probably couple meetings did we even talk about training. which I thought, honestly, looking at it now, I'm like, wow, I'm in love with my staff, like our staff even more because of that. We really attacked the person, not the student, not the athlete. It was like, let's take care of them as if they were your son or daughter, you know? And then obviously we had to do our job, you know, and the typical X's and O's, like, okay, what are we going to do from a training standpoint? And then that catapulted into kind of what you guys are seeing on social media right now.
It's interesting, the thought process, right? Where you went from thinking about the student athletes, who they are as a person, what are they going to have to deal with, how are they handle this? You start thinking about, are they going to be able to eat, just the things alone, right? And then you work your way all the way down to almost the last priority, right? Is will they be able to work out? That's a very interesting way of looking at things, which shows the care that I guess most of us have for the student athletes and the reason why we're in the industry in the first place.
And then the communication piece comes in there too. Like, yeah, it's 2020 and yeah, you have social media, but I mean, think about it. These athletes come into your office and you get FaceTime with them. Like, I think as a performance coach, you get a different relationship than a lot of your administrators and a lot of your sport coaches, because for one, we don't determine playing time. So these kids will come flop down on in your office and they'll talk to you about anything for like an hour. Well, you don't get that hour now. Like, so you consciously have to pick up your phone and call them or text them. And, you know, goodness gracious, if they don't respond, like, it's our job to, like, okay, now that's another conversation we had, is like, you have to be intentful and you have to be purposeful. Because if not, like, you don't know what support they have at home. You could be their only contact outside of a couple, like, snaps and their surface level conversations they have with people, really. Think about it. Everything's recorded right now. And we're in the day and age of liability. If you notice on our Instagram, you swipe over, we have a disclaimer, because everything you're putting out there, I think, in substance-wise, you got to be accountable for it, because it's not just them doing it. It could be anybody. So I think on that aspect, like, we had to be very mindful of what we're putting out, because it's out there permanently. And it's not like we can adjust. Like, you're on the floor, you can see it with the athlete, like, you know, your coach's eye, like, wow, that athlete doesn't need to do that today. Let me switch it up. Well, guess what? You're not there now. So I think the communication in our field right now has to be the highest and most efficient. And at the same time, think about it, all these athletes learn in different ways. So some of them you can talk to, some of them you got to show them, some of them has to go hands-on. So I think even in coaches' approaches of, like, just, you can't just send a packet. Like, you got to be, I don't know, so intentful about your communication right now. And I think it's going to make us better coaches. I think we're going to learn from this. If anything, it's going to teach us technology, I'll tell you that much.
It's very important. I wonder about, so far, what you've seen in terms of adjusting for specific athletes and their learning style and their training styles. How have you dealt with that, I guess, in the last, probably, since things have changed so much in 5 to 7 days? How have you dealt with that so far? Or do you have plans to deal with that, I guess?
I think that's why we've kind of approached our social media like we have. Because, you know, we're very new here in our athletic performance. We have our nutrition staff too. And obviously, like, right now, that's a huge piece. They're talking about this virus affecting immune systems. Well, what can help immune system, you know, more than exercise and food? So our nutrition staff, we wanted to make sure we utilize them to the fullest, because just because you're home doesn't mean, like, okay, well, we go on vacation. So what we did is we're like, okay, we have all this content, this information, and what we don't want to do is pollute it and dirty it down. But we also got to recognize we're a different part of the, like, country than most, and we just are. And it's taken me a couple of years to realize that, but food here is different. Like, things just move slower here, and that's okay. Like, I've recognized where we're at, and I think that's what we've got to do when we're addressing our student athletes. And on top of that, we still got to keep our current staff engaged and growing. So we were like, let's pick a day, and then we'll do whatever you guys want on that day. Let your personality come out. But at the same time, because we have different learners, let's film it so they can hear us. Let's film it and show demos so they can see it. And then let's make sure whatever they're doing, they can do with any piece of equipment at home.
Before we get deeper, explain to us what exactly you are doing with Instagram and social media. Let's talk about that, and then we can get deeper into it and some of the stuff you're doing.
So on our Instagram, what we're going to do is we have Raging Cajun Refuel. That's our nutrition kind of area. And then we have our performance, like, Instagram page. And we have days set up. So it starts on Sunday. We'll slow it down Sunday. And on my day, it's kind of going to be used to reset their mind and their body. So it'll be anything from meditation. It's going to be anything from, like, foam rolling and stretching. We're going to do things like hey, like a good thing for your mind is coloring. So we may do that one week. And I'm going to show them different ways to kind of turn off and get their minds going so they can attack the rest of the week, because guess what? These kids still have to stay eligible, right? So that's what Sundays are used for. Monday through Saturday is going to be a little bit more training based. So on Mondays, it's Meathead Monday. We've got one of our guys kind of hitting that up. Tuesday is called Turned Up Tuesday. One of our football guys, he's got the biggest personality in the world. He's taking that day. And then Wisdom Wednesday is when we're going to do little, like, if we see something out that the nation's putting out for health tips, or like if our school's putting something out, we're going to go Wisdom Wednesday. And that'll be more of just an educational platform. Thursday is Tempo Thursday, and then we have Fast Friday, and then we have Steady State Saturday. So we just let all of our coaches pick the names for their days, let them pick what they wanted to do on those days, and we're going to post it every day so our student athletes can kind of log on, follow through. And then nutrition did the same thing. They have Monday moments. They have Taste It Tuesday. We're literally going to do a cooking show. I think we're going to make gumbo. So like I said, we looked out into our community and we're like, how do we really get people involved? And our next thought was even more beyond just our student athletes. So we're encouraging our athletics department to kind of join in too, because we're all going to be stuck in the house. And that's the cool thing about Cajuns is if a crisis occurs, do they stick together and do we kind of come together? And I figured what better way than to have a social media outlet to do that on.
And then the engagement, right, in terms of feedback from student athletes. Have you guys set up to where you'll know if you need to adjust something, you'll know whether or not they're engaging with it?
Oh, yeah, no. So we also have GroupMe set up with our student athletes. So like I told you before, we sent a regular, typical strength conditioning packet home with them. And then what we've done is we've set it up to where Mondays, I'm going to call these 10 athletes. Tuesdays, I'm going to call these 10 athletes. And so we're kind of checking in as we go. And I think we've done such a good job of building that rapport with them that a couple of them already reached out to me yesterday to tell me how it's not called a story feed, it's called a story, and to correct me on my terminology while I'm using Instagram. Oh, yeah, they definitely reminded me of my age in that moment. But, yeah, so, we've got that set up, and then on top of that, we had a couple of them, send us a message in DMs to kind of help us out. They're like, Candice, to create spaces, do that, or, hey, I don't have access to a towel. What could I do for this stretch instead? So it's kind of like an open forum. They can DM us. They can leave messages at the bottom if they want. But the neat thing is within the past 2 days, we've had over 60 other individuals kind of join our Instagram page. And, we only have maybe 1,000 followers. And I think now we're up to close to 1,600. So it just keeps growing. Today alone, I think we had 40 people at us. It's crazy just to kind of watch it.
And these are people that don't have anything to do with the program, huh?
Yeah, you've got people in the community. It's been really neat to watch the students on campus at us. Now, of course, NCAA, if it's a prospective student, there's certain things we've got to, be careful for and watch out for. But to just see, student athletes on campus joining in, or our senior administrators, they joined in on it. So, and we're just on, let's see, what is this? Technically day 2 of releasing the content. I'm excited to see where we are 3 weeks from now.
Okay, Candice, so the follow-up question I have regarding all this is when all the structure is figured out in terms of working from home and you report to whoever you report to in the department, what will be the evaluation? How will you tell her that this is what we're doing and this is how we know if we're being successful? How will you evaluate the things you're doing now? I know we're early in the process, but obviously, in leadership, how you evaluate the things that you've done is very important. So talk to me a little bit about that part.
That's the thing that we were kind of bouncing around ideas on of how we could do that because, obviously, in my mind, we're playing in the fall. So I don't know. Typically, you would base it on, okay, what's your injury rate? Well, how many kids are returning? But, now it's so unknown. That's something we're trying to figure out. So the biggest thing is how many kids can we get engaged? How were we on setting up our weeks? Because just like we're asking them to plan, I've got to make sure our staff is still engaged. So I think our biggest piece is when we're putting stuff out there, how can we do this on the timely manner that we said? And then, doing surveys with the athletes because we have different apps we can send out to them. So it's hey, maybe after week 2, we send a survey out about the training. What would you guys like to see more? How was this? Was this, suitable for what you needed? And then if we're kind of noticing that we're lagging in something, just readjusting and, like everything else, adapt, change it up, and then make it to where it fits that student athlete. And then I think also just shutting up a little bit more and listening to people's feedback and taking the time to call people and ask them their honest opinion, I think is going to help a lot for that too. But I think when all is said and done, the biggest piece for us is going to be, okay, how do these kids return? Are they in good spirits? Do they feel confident? Maybe they're not setting PRs and doing all that stuff, but can we keep those soft issues down by even just doing a little bit, because it's better than nothing. So that's kind of how we're going to gauge it. But I guess more of like an accountable piece are going to be some of these surveys we send out. And then I think we're going to switch our page maybe over to the business page, and they'll show statistics on the growth and if content's being viewed. And so I think that's what we're going to do in the next couple of days.
Have you worked with, now you got to forgive me, but does the University of Louisiana have a creative department in terms of athletics? And have they helped you in terms of looking at things with social media? You mentioned the video department helped with some of the early videos.
Yeah, we have a marketing department, and I called the guy that's kind of in charge of that on day one. I'm like, hey, we've got this crazy idea. I know you guys are going to probably be crazy swamped because, I mean, think about recruiting right now. All you have is social media platform. And he's like, oh, my gosh, of course, we'd love to help. And so I think what's crazy is just going over there and talking with them. I mean, I got to learn so much about them. I got to learn so much about Cajun culture because a lot of the people that are here have been here for a while. So just being able to kind of just slow down, go over there and talk, I think this is going to help build our relationship between like our department, their department, other departments, kind of here at, UL. So I'm pretty excited about building that through this. But no, like I said earlier, like if it wasn't for them, I don't know how we could have done this. So I'm really appreciative to them.
Well, Coach Walls, it sounds like you have things going as best as you possibly can. It sounds like you got engagement from the student athletes and building relationships with other aspects of the department there in athletics. This sounds like something that I guess most of us will probably follow to see if this is something that other people should copy. Everybody's probably doing their own type of thing. But what I know about coaching and performance coaches, football coaches, basketball coaches, they all learn from each other. So I'm pretty sure other people are watching to see how they can implement something like this on their campus.
It was a challenge kind of given to us because we had seen a couple schools like Mississippi State and a couple other ones that already started to kind of do some of this stuff. And so, like I said, we just took it and kind of made it our own. And please, if anybody out there or even you have suggestions or ideas, like we're kind of all in this together right now. Like nobody knows what's going to happen in the next week, let alone the next 3 days. So I think if we can all just kind of check our egos to the side, listen a little bit more than talk, it's going to be a really neat time in our field to be able to figure this next step out together.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
No, I thank you for having me.
That was Coach Candice Wall. She's the Assistant Director of Athletics for Athletic Performance at University of Louisiana. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.